This video segment discusses insiders and outsiders with a special focus on outsiders. The reason we would take a special look at outsiders is that we want to know if they're true, objective outsiders who can serve as corporate whistleblowers on a board should that whistle need to be blown for any possible wrongdoing that's gone on within an organization. Now, the definitions of each insiders and outsiders are very, very simple. The insider is a board member who works for the organization, probably on the top management team, and an outsider is a board director who does not work for the organization or is not on the top management team. Now, the purpose and the utility of an outsider in the context of corporate governance is that outsiders not working for the company have no linkages or are not beholden unto the management team for their livelihoods, for their salaries. And thus, in theory, these outsiders should be better corporate policemen should they need to fulfill such a role. Now, we're going to take a look at a board of directors as it was reported in the 1996 annual report of Tyco, a company which did have some egregious governance problems just the year prior to this. If you look at their board of directors as it's stated on paper, we can make the following assumptions. First of all, Mr. Breen, who is noted as a chairman and CEO, the first thing you would pick up on is that Mr. Breen is a person who enjoys CEO duality. And, of course, since he's a CEO, works for Tyco, then Mr. Breen is an insider. Now, you'll see a different story for the rest of the people on this board of directors as it was reported in their annual report for all stakeholders to see. The next director, Mr. Blair, worked for a different organization, an outsider. Mr. Buckley with 3M, an outsider. Mr. Dupereau, a different company, outsider. And so it goes. You have representatives from the NCAAP, Roman Haas, DuPont, Convent Capital, VF Corporation, Imperial Chemical, Marsh, and Harwinton Capital. These are all outsiders on paper. But we want to take a look. What we don't know is what the linkages of all of these outsiders are with the top management team or with Mr. Breen. And maybe there's none. We really don't know without taking a very, very close look at what's going on here. Before we get into Enron's board and how we can really, put the outsiders to the litmus test of how much of an outsider are they really, before we do that, it's important to just review where Enron has been, at least prior to 2002. You've all heard the Enron story, I'm assuming. If you haven't, by all means, Google it, look it up, and you'll hear of the corporate fraud that went on there. But Enron was a very fine-performing organization, and this is just a graph of its stock price. The stock price basically quintupled. It went from about $15 to $90 over a fairly short period of time, 7 years. So if you were an investor and had cashed out at this point in time, you'd be very, very happy. Enron was built on smoke and mirrors, was built on fraudulent schemes, and when these improprieties were found out by the public, they started selling and dumping their stock that Enron really wasn't worth much, and you can see their stock price, drop down to nothing. That's the background on Enron. You ask yourself, how could this happen when a board should be constructed with insiders and outsiders, and where's the whistleblowing capability of the board? If you look at Enron's board for the year prior to these corporate crimes, or when these corporate crimes were found out, you see a very interesting story. On Enron's board, the first board member was the president of a carpet company in Iowa, which would make that person an outsider. The second board member was a president of another organization, not being Enron, so that person too is an outsider. The third member of the board happens to be the CEO, which obviously makes them a insider with CEO duality. And the same is true as far as being an insider for board members 4, a manager of Enron, board member 5, also a manager, and board member 6. So what you have here is you have a board thus far constructed of 1, 2 outsiders and 4 insiders. But that's not the complete story. There are 2 other board members. A board member reported on paper as a president of a California organization in energy, and Enron, of course, was in Texas, Houston. So this person would technically be, on paper, an outsider. And the final board member is a New York City attorney, not employed, actually self-employed, not employed by Enron. So you have 2 more outsiders down here, coupled with the 2 outsiders here, gives you 4 outsiders and 4 insiders. So you ask yourself, how could this have happened with Enron that no one would have stood up and blown the whistle or cried wolf when they saw wrongdoings? In the module reading that you're currently involved with, we asked the question, are these outsiders affiliated directors? Are they directors who have some sort of money-making tie to the organization, like a supplier, handle legal work, insurance, etc.? Did they used to work for the organization, and therefore did they are they friends with, or did they hire or groom people who are currently on the board? Are there any family ties here that we don't know of because last names happen to be different and there's in-laws involved? Or otherwise, are these outsiders in any way, shape, or form friends or cronies with the insiders? And you don't want to have that happen. You want to separate, distinct insiders and distinct outsiders. Upon closer examination of this board of directors, it was found out that board member number 1, the president of this third-party company, an outsider, if you will, on paper, actually happened to be married into the family of the CEO, was a son-in-law, okay? Which in red then makes this person not really an outsider, in fact, more of an insider when you apply the test, are they affiliated, retired, family directors, descendants, or friends of the management team? This person right here, in the truest sense of the word, is probably tainted towards being an insider. The second board member, president of a different organization, who on paper, again, is very much an outsider, actually is a major supplier to Enron. The major business that this organization took in came in because of the relationship with this person and this organization. So because they are affiliated and they are beholden unto the running of Enron by the current members, they might be less apt to blow a whistle as well if they know their livelihood depends on the board. And as we talked about board members 3 through 6, they're already insiders by virtue of working for the organization. When you had your last 2 board members on there, this organization right here, which is not Enron, it's a California company, it was found out that it was actually owned by Enron. It was a subsidiary. And so, therefore, this person's boss is this person, is the CEO. That's who they report to. And it was also found out that the New York City attorney at law, who also is an outsider by virtue of being self-employed, not employed by Enron, actually their livelihood depended entirely on the business of 3 of these 4 Enron insiders. So what you have here is what looked like on paper a completely objective board, or half objective board, half insiders, half outsiders. When you apply this, this finer-grained analysis that we're talking about in this module, are they really and truly outsiders? No, they're not. They're probably all, to a great extent, insiders because they're all linked in some way, shape, or form to the managers of the organization. This is one of the reasons, not the only, one of the many reasons that Enron was able to get away with what it got away with, lack of proper governance on the board.